They told Keanu Reeves to leave, expecting him to get angry. His response drowned the entire diner in silence. A simple dinner turns into an unexpected reckoning. Silence, stares, hidden fears. The tension that begins in a small diner takes a dramatic turn with a single sentence from Keanu. But tonight, who will truly win? The diner's owner, Don, made his decision. A cup of coffee, a simple gesture, a small shift. Sometimes it's not grand words that change the course of a river, just a single moment. Keanu Reeves pulled his car up in front of Owen's Diner, an old-time diner standing against time in the heart of Springfield, Ohio. Its flickering neon sign cast a faint glow into the night. The aroma of coffee and sizzling meat seeped through the doors, blending with the cool air, radiating a nostalgic warmth. It had been a long day. Meetings, handshakes, controlled smiles. The crowds were exhausting. All he needed now was a cup of coffee and a few moments of peace. As he opened the door, the chime rang through the air. Inside was quieter than he expected. Worn-out leather booths, wooden tables gleaming under the dim lights, yellowed customer photos lining the walls. The diner's usual patrons were in place. The old man leaning on the counter, the couple in the corner, the middle-aged woman stirring her coffee slowly. But something was different. An invisible tension lingered in the air. The moment Keanu stepped inside, the rhythm of conversation changed. The coffee cup in the waitress's hand hovered mid-air for a second too long. A man set his spoon down, his face tightening. A young man about to take a bite of his burger hesitated. He knew these looks. But this wasn't just the stunned reaction of seeing a celebrity. The hostess approached with a slight hesitation. "Good evening." Her voice was polite, but there was an undertone of unease. "Dine in or take out?" Keanu smiled slightly. "I'll dine in, if that's okay." A brief pause, a wait that lasted just a second too long. The hostess turned toward the kitchen. It seemed routine, but Keanu could feel the whispers behind the counter. The low hum of conversation faded. The old man at the counter stopped stirring his coffee. A few tables away, a young man folded his arms, watching closely. The woman placed her coffee cup on the table. Hard. The air had shifted. Would Keanu Reeves be swept into this current? Or would he change it? The sounds from the kitchen rose, then quickly fell, as if the water had reached its boiling point but never surfaced. Keanu couldn't hear the conversation inside, but he already knew the outcome. When the hostess returned, there was a faint hesitation in her gaze. One hand was clenched inside the pocket of her apron. At that moment, the hum of the diner completely died down. It was as if everyone at the tables had stopped breathing. The hostess took a deep breath. The tension was hidden in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice unsteady. "We can't serve you here." Silence. A silence so heavy it pressed down on every shoulder in the room. Every sound in the diner had frozen in place. Even the soft clatter of a fork hitting a plate echoed through the air. Keanu studied the woman's face carefully. This wasn't about the business. This was personal. Behind him, the old man at the counter lowered his fork and averted his gaze. A few tables away, a young man sat with his arms crossed, watching with a faint smirk. Keanu Reeves had lived through moments like this countless times, on sets, in interviews, on red carpets. But here? At a diner? Just a man wanting to eat? He took a deep breath. This moment was his to shape. He could fight. He could walk away. But Keanu Reeves chose to shift the river's course. "Is there a particular reason you won't serve me?" His voice wasn't angry. Nor was it indifferent, just calm and steady. The hostess looked away. Her eyes flicked toward the kitchen, as if waiting for approval. But no answer came. Finally, she spoke, her voice shaking. "We don't want you here." The diner shrank. The air grew heavier. Even the old customer photos on the walls seemed to bear silent witness. Keanu Reeves hesitated. This wasn't just a man being denied a meal. This was a test. Would he push against the wave trying to force him out? Everyone held their breath. The diner, like a river before a flood, was filled with a deep silence, thick with tension. Keanu Reeves never lost his temper, not for a second. He locked eyes with the hostess, then turned his gaze to the man behind the counter. "Are you really afraid of me?" His words were a silent scream. No one answered. But their eyes said everything. The old man at the counter stirred his coffee, or at least he pretended to. The spoon never moved. Hesitation. A few tables away, the young man with the smug grin was waiting for the right moment to say, "You don't belong here." And then, the kitchen door swung open. A broad-shouldered man, his apron dusted with flour, stepped out. The real owner of the diner. The faded name tag on his chest spelled it out in bold letters. Don. Don looked at Keanu for a long moment. Not friendly, not hostile. "What's the problem?" His voice was deep. The hostess took a step back, but said nothing. Don folded his arms across his chest, narrowing his eyes at Keanu. "You're not supposed to be here." Keanu lowered his head slightly and smiled, as if he had been expecting this moment. "Why?" Don didn't answer. Instead, he cast a quick glance toward the kitchen before turning back to Keanu. "There are people here who don't want to see you. It could cause trouble." And in that instant, everyone in the diner realized it. This wasn't Don's decision. Keanu took a deep breath, nodding slowly. The tide was receding, and the truth was beginning to surface. "You don't want me here. I get it," he said. His voice never rose. His posture never shifted. "But I have to ask." His eyes scanned the faces in the diner. "If I walk out that door, will you really have won?" The diner was as still as a lake. Eyes darted away. Words were swallowed, but everyone knew. This wasn't just about forcing a man out of a diner. This was a confrontation with truth. A mirror being held up. And then, Keanu Reeves did something no one expected. He pulled out a chair and sat down at the table. Don frowned. "What are you doing?" Keanu placed his hands on the table. "We're talking." The air in the diner grew heavier. People looked like they were still eating, but in reality, not a single fork moved. Don locked eyes with Keanu. There was a hidden conflict in his gaze. "You think you understand us?" he said, his voice firm but controlled. Keanu Reeves smiled slightly. He had heard this line before, many times. "I'm trying to." Don nodded. Then he let out a heavy sigh. "Big men come in, say big words, and then they leave. But we stay." The diner was silent, but Keanu could feel the weight of every word. This wasn't just about dinner. "But I'm here," he said, "and I haven't left." Don looked away. The old man at the counter pretended to sip his coffee, but the cup never moved. From the back, the hostess's voice broke the silence. "Are we giving him a menu, Don?" Everyone in the diner held their breath. This was a crossroads. Don stared at Keanu for a long moment. Judgment, doubt, and just a little curiosity. Finally, he gave a small nod. "Mary, get him a menu." The silence cracked. A woman at a nearby table let out a quiet breath. The old man at the counter finally took a sip of his coffee. Mary placed a menu in front of Keanu. There was still doubt in her eyes, but there was also a question. "Are you really here?" "Our coffee's strong," Mary said, offering a cautious but genuine smile. Keanu glanced at the menu, then took a sip of his coffee. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "I can definitely feel that." The old man at the counter chuckled softly. A few other customers, too. The tension eased, just a little. Don nodded. "I'm still not sure." Keanu Reeves held Don's gaze. His smile was small, but full of meaning. "There's only one way to find out. Keep talking." The diner had settled into a softer silence compared to just minutes ago. People were still on edge, but now their eyes held only curiosity. As Keanu Reeves sipped his coffee, he turned his gaze toward Don. "Do you really care about the people who are here?" he asked. Don hesitated for a moment. It seemed like a simple question, but underneath, it carried much deeper meaning. "Why do you care?" Don asked, furrowing his brow. Keanu paused, then shrugged. "Because everything starts with a small choice." At that moment, everyone in the diner realized something. Keanu wasn't trying to prove himself. He wasn't trying to win an argument. He was simply refusing to leave. The old man at the counter set his coffee down. His gaze slowly shifted toward Keanu. "Sometimes a man just wants to eat." His words echoed through the room. Don lowered his head slightly. Maybe for the first time he was beginning to question things. Mary approached, holding a coffee pot. "Would you like some more?" Keanu smiled slightly. It was a question with an obvious answer. "Please." The sound of coffee pouring set the rhythm of the room's new atmosphere. Conversation slowly returned. People realized that Keanu was still there, but they were no longer uncomfortable. Don took a deep breath. No battle had been lost, but something had been won. "Maybe we misunderstood you," he said. Keanu lifted his cup, his eyes locked onto Don's. "It doesn't matter," he said. "Trying to understand is enough." That night, dinner became more than just a meal. People didn't change their minds, but at least they listened. And sometimes change doesn't start with grand words, just a small gesture. If you've made it this far, I have a question for you. Have you ever had to choose between walking away or staying to listen? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think and whether this story resonated with you. Take a moment to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. There's always another story to tell, and I'll be here next time to share it with you.